Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Come Boating Winter Adventure Series and tonight's presentation, A Passion for Ocean Adventure with Larry Rosenfeld. I'm Brenda Harrington, Program Librarian at the Belfast Free Library, and I want to thank you all for joining us. And I'm pleased to be able to co-sponsor the Winter Adventure Series with Come Boating in 2022 and glad we can do this remotely. As many of you may remember, before March of 2020, when we had to go remote, these programs filled the library's Abbott room to capacity. And one of the benefits of using Zoom is that we can record these programs that can then be viewed on the library's YouTube channel, and you can find the link to that from our website. We ask that you please type your questions into the chat box, and we'll get to them during the Q&A after the presentation. And as I said at the beginning, please keep your mics muted. Next, I'd like to turn the mic over to Russ Eggleston for updates about Come Boating, and then he will turn the mic over to Mickey Green from the Come Boating Program Committee to introduce tonight's speaker. So go ahead, Russ, take the mic.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Russ Eggleston on behalf of the Belfast Library and Come Boating. Welcome to our monthly Winter Adventure Series. Before we get started with tonight's presentation, I'd briefly like to say a few words about Come Boating. Come Boating is a non-profit organization based here in Belfast, whose purpose is to get people out on the water, both rowing and sailing, enjoying our beautiful scenery, camaraderie, challenging exercise, while strengthening our local maritime heritage and our connection to the sea. We have 3 Cornish pilot gigs, which hold 6 rowers and a cox. Rows are available for all levels, including orientation rows, community rows, exercise rows, men and women's racing teams, and winter rowing. And for those interested in learning how to sail, we also have regular sails scheduled in the warmer weather. Like any organization, we have a budget and are in need of donations. Currently, we have 172 members, with the annual membership $25 for an individual and $45 at the family level. Please consider renewing your membership, joining as a new member, or perhaps just donating. The donate link is on our website, comeboating.org, comeboating.org, and it's about 3/4 of the way down the main page. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to pass it over to Mickey Green, who will introduce this evening's presenter.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to just give a mention to our next presentation, which will, and the last one of the season, which is on March 15th. And it's J.B. Turner, founder and president of Front Street Shipyard, right here in Belfast. J.B. has created a facility large enough and capable enough to accommodate some of the greatest yachts currently sailing. He will give us a history of the yard and stories of some of the amazing vessels which have passed through the yard over the years. So be sure to register by going to the Belfast Free Library website, virtual programs. Now for Larry. Larry Rosenfeld and my husband go way back, having raced 505 dinghies together up and down the East Coast in the 70s and 80s. The first time I met Larry was by picking him up at the Baltimore airport after he had just returned from climbing a Himalaya or 2. Fast forward about 20 years, and I found myself trudging through Marblehead, where Larry had very kindly found us a berth for our sailboat. We were returning to the Chesapeake Bay after cruising the Maine coast that summer. We were happy to go ashore for a change of scene, stretch our legs, and amble through town with him. It was the middle of August and sweltering hot. But Larry was wearing ski boots, no less, and a backpack full of weights, all in an effort to get in shape in preparation for his voyage to Antarctica. It was everything I could do to keep up with him. The last time we saw Larry was when he sailed into Belfast Harbor with the New York Yacht Club aboard the 60-foot gunboat catamaran Flo during our last Cambodian regatta in 2020. We had a test run of Larry's presentation a few days ago, and Brenda commented that perhaps we should have some Dramamine ready while viewing this footage. So be prepared for a mind-boggling journey. This man is amazing, and I know you'll enjoy hearing about his incredible adventures. Larry, we're so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mickey, and nice to speak to all of you this evening. It's been a lot of fun adventures, and the hardest thing was choosing just a few of them. So we've got a lot on the program tonight. I'm going to share my screen here. Make sure, can everybody see it? Can somebody let me know if you can see it?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Great. Okay. So we're going to have some videos. I hope the sound comes through on the videos. My internet went out at the house just in 2 minutes before the presentation, so I'm tethered to my phone, but hopefully that'll work. Okay, so the adventures I chose to talk about tonight are 5 of them. As I say, it was pretty tough to pare it down to these 5. And so these go back more than 20 years now. And the first one, Antarctica with our kids and my wife, and then the race around the world on the giant catamaran team adventure with Cam Lewis from Lincolnville as my partner. And then the Trans-Pacific race, which was a world record across the Pacific from San Francisco to Tokyo with 9 chain-smoking Frenchmen. And then Bermuda Sloop was the maiden voyage of the Spirit of Bermuda, which was built right in Rockport, Maine, out of wood and at Taylor Allen's place. And the last one will be the Shackleton Traverse in South Georgia Island near Antarctica. So let's get going. So the first one is Antarctica, and I've been very lucky to be married to Amy Drinker, my wife of some 40 years, and our 2 kids who are now 33 and 31. Max is on the left there. He was 10 at the time of this picture, and Willie was 8. And this was the Holy Iceberg. I was getting ready to do the race around the world. I just sold my business, and I wanted to take the family to Antarctica and to do a reconnoiter of Cape Horn before we went there on the race around the world. I'd never been down there before. So our friend Skip Novak had a boat called Pelagic. This was the 54-foot Pelagic, and we sailed from Ushuaia, Argentina, past Cape Horn, and right down. This was Desolation Island, or Deception Island, which was a volcano that erupted and breached and filled with water. So it's about 5 miles around, and foggy because the water is 80 degrees for about 2 inches. And then it's 32 degrees just below that. It's crazy when you put your legs in it. This is Max and I looking at the navigation. And the kids stayed out of school for 6 weeks, and we were able in 1999 to send emails and sometimes some small pictures to their classmates in school. And this was walking along the black sand beaches in Deception Island. And the volcano had gotten active again, and they had a little station there that they just left. So everything was just left there as it was. This was when we pulled into a cove, and we always had to be very careful, because if the wind changed or the current changed and the ice started to come in, we had to be ready at a moment's notice to get off the land and get on the boat and get out of there, because otherwise an iceberg would come in and sit on the anchor or freeze the boat in for possibly months. So we were always very careful to be ready to go at a moment's notice. These are great pictures of the kids with the penguins. We got to see tons and tons of penguins. It was a lot smellier and noisier than you'd expect, in case you haven't ever seen penguins. But you know, the kids were able to just walk around them, and they were very comfortable with people. We got to do a lot of skiing in Antarctica. This was on the peninsula, and just explore. You know, the cruising was amazing, but each harbor was about 100 miles away from another one. Sometimes we'd have to leave at 2 a.m. in the morning. Somebody would be on watch, and we'd see that the wind was shifting, and we need to go to another location in the middle of the night. So really had to be on your guard. Skip had two friends, one who had climbed Mount Everest, and they were climbing, making the first descent of of something bigger than El Cap that came right down to the water, called Cape Renard. There's the kids conquering an iceberg. And this is Cape Horn in the background as we were coming back, and sailed right past Cape Horn and between Cape Horn and Isla Herschel. It was just amazing there. It almost looked like Scotland to me. Years later, 15 years later, Will and Paige, his wife, and Amy and I and a bunch of other friends were able to go on Cape Horn, and that was fantastic. But this was our first time seeing Cape Horn in 30 knots and 30-foot waves. So now I'm going to go on. The next year, we were building the world's fastest sailboat, a 110-foot catamaran that we were going to race around the world. Cam and I. Cam was the skipper. He'd already been around the world once in an 86-foot catamaran. And this was my first time sailing such a long distance. But this was what I'd wanted to do for a long time.
Well, basically, you're just traveling as fast as you can. You're pretty much on the edge.
Hopefully
pretty much
you can
as
hear
much sail area
the
as you
voice
possibly
of
can.
Randy.
You're flying a hull. You're bow down on those big waves. The rudder sometimes grab a little air, so your steering's quite marginal. So it's a real teamwork effort. The helmsman and the crew working the sails, trying to keep it going in a straight line, not spinning out.
These catamarans, especially this one, is a whole leap ahead in ocean racing technology. We're doing 20 knots right now. Most people will never do 20 knots on a sailboat in their life. Very few of us join that club.
Traveling at speeds between 25 and 30 knots across flat seas, Team Adventure began its Atlantic crossing at a record pace. The boat ate up miles. It appeared to be in position to break the record for the greatest distance traveled in 24 hours.
So we had, at the start of the race around the world, we had 3 ABC cameramen on board, and they jumped off in Gibraltar into we left them off in a little rubber raft, and the Gibraltar police picked them up. But it was on Peter Jennings and Nightline early on. And this was, we started the race December 31st, 2000. And Cam and I built a website because our goal was to be able to communicate about our voyage, not just win the race, but communicate about the voyage every day and send videos and pictures back. And so we built a website and built a education foundation called Team Adventure. Probably had 10,000 kids working, watching it, and getting emails and from around the world. And this was 2001, so the web was very new. It was before the word blog had been invented, and that's what we were doing. And building the boat, backing up just a moment, building the boat, we built it in France, and it was so big that we had to build it in a destroyer factory because there was nothing else wide enough. Here, the boat, each hull had been built in an oven that was 110 feet long and about 10 feet wide and 20 feet tall. And then we had to truck them into the destroyer factory in order to set the two hulls down 60 feet apart so that we could build the rest of the boat. Took almost a year to build in Cherbourg, France. And here was the first trials. We were doing 40 knots and 25 knots of wind with one reef and a staysail. The speeds were just amazing. The acceleration was just incredible. We could fly a hull. The boat, you know, I've been sailing a 60-foot catamaran recently that will do 30 knots. And that catamaran weighs 20 tons. This catamaran, with all the food and water, we had 1 ton of food, literally, and water, fuel, all the people, 14 people. It weighed less than 20 tons, and it was 110 feet long. So that's why it went so fast. Here we are at the start of the race around the world. We started in Barcelona. There were 1 million people that week coming down to the quay to see the 7 boats that were going to take off. Actually, one boat didn't make it. Team Phillips broke up in the North Atlantic before the race started. Steve Fawcett on PlayStation didn't make it to the equator, but you know had every chance of being a strong competitor. And so there were 5 of us left, and so that's the start of the race in Barcelona. This is going upwind at 25, 30 knots in the trade wind, nice day in the trade winds. But you can see it's pretty wet and crazy. There it is, kind of deep. So our race started in Barcelona, as I said, out through Gibraltar, down around the Cape of Good Hope, Africa. But in order to go around the Cape of Good Hope, because there's the St. Helena high pressure system that goes counterclockwise, you need to go almost to Brazil to turn left to go under Africa. So that's what we did, and that's why we passed so close to Brazil, is because of the prevailing winds over there. And we were in first place as we got down below Africa. And we were in the first day in the Southern Ocean with big winds, 30-foot waves, 30, 40 knots of wind. We were doing 40 knots, sometimes 50 knots, screaming down these waves for a minute, 2 minutes long. Just the noise in the boat was just incredible. And what happened the second day we were in those waves, we saw 13 icebergs that had floated up from the Weddell Sea down here on the currents and broken up. And I could see them on the radar, and we had to be really careful to not hit any small bits. I had to have somebody with a thermal imaging camera watching, taking 20-minute watches to make sure that we didn't hit any pieces of ice. And we were hitting these waves. We were going so fast that we were flying down the face of a wave for a minute or two, and we would slam into the back of the next wave. And we did about 10 or 15 of those. And just before sunset, about 23 days out from Barcelona, we slammed into a wave so hard, we were doing 40 knots, and all of a sudden we were doing about 15 or 18 knots. So it was like somebody just slamming on the brakes. And 2 of our guys went flying and got hurt. One guy got thrown into a wall down below. He was just getting ready to come on watch. Another guy was trying to move a sail and got thrown and onto the trampoline and tore a bunch of ligaments in his neck. So we had to stop and start sailing toward Cape Town to get them into the hospital. This is what the route looks like going around the world, but from the bottom of the world. It's really just going around Antarctica. So we went to Cape Town, we dropped them off. There was a problem with the boat that we fixed as well. Once we stopped, we had to wait for 48 hours before we were allowed to start again. And it took us a week to get to Cape Town and a week to get back. So we were in first place, and by the time we left Cape Town, we were in last place. And we had a lot of catching up to do. This is Jacques Vincent, one of our watch captains. He'd been around the world with Cam. And you can see this is what we ate. We had 75 days worth of food and divided into 4 meals, about 6,000 calories a day in the Southern Ocean and about 4,000 in the doldrums. So we had dog bowls because they were really stable, and we had sporks, forks and spoons welded together so that we didn't lose them. And we carried all of our supporters. This was a nonprofit, as I said, and we had a lot of people donate money for us to build this boat. And so we carried their names and spirit around the world with us. The bunks were hammocks, but they were fixed with carbon tubes, so you didn't roll around too much. And they were nice and cool when it was hot, and they were plenty warm with our sleeping bags when it was cold. We didn't really have heat in the boat. We had a little bit of heat we could run sometimes to dry things out. This was my nav station, and I had a co-navigator, Jean-Yves Bernot from France, who was one of the world's top weather routers. He taught me a lot about weather and about navigation in these big ocean systems. And so it was fantastic to be sitting side by side with him every day for 3 months around the world. You can see the scale of the boat is just tremendous, and the waves in the Southern Ocean were, the boat started to feel kind of small, even though in the harbor it felt huge. These are the, just look back, and sometimes you would see a big wave coming and you would know that you needed to head up a little bit just so that you didn't fly down the face of the wave too fast. There was one day when we hit, the only place we could go was to get set up to be in a hurricane. And it was 75 knot winds and 60-foot waves for 3 days and 3 nights. And just think about trying to drive a boat in 60-foot waves where you're screaming down the face of these waves at 50 knots and you can't see where you're going. All you can do is feel it. And the boat just, when the wave comes up underneath you, the boat just takes off like acceleration of a Tesla. If you've ever accelerated fast in a Tesla, you know what I mean. And so we were, we had only 5 people who could drive the boat at night because it was just too hairy. If you didn't turn at the right time, we could have capsized.
How far away do you reckon we are? 1 mile. 1 mile?
This is a little bit out of order. It's going back to the day of big icebergs.
I don't feel like I lost any memory either, because Rick asked me before, and then I was then Larry asked me some question, I couldn't get to it, but then I remember after a while.
Yeah. Well, Rick, you got a little problem here. There's some busted beam on the boat.
So that was Mickey, who was one of the guys who got hurt, and so we got him up to the hospital in Cape Town and got to fix the boat. And then we went back down into the Southern Ocean and through New Zealand, across the Pacific Ocean for weeks. And that was where the 75 knot winds and 60-foot seas were. And this was rounding Cape Horn again. And this was the team at Cape Horn. So then we beat up the Atlantic, past the Falklands and all the way up past Brazil and into the North Atlantic and into Gibraltar. It was a long time coming because we had sort of passed our Mount Everest, Cape Horn, and we were just trying to get there as soon as we could. And we got into Marseille 2 weeks after the first boat had gotten in because of our 2-week holiday in Cape Town. And there were still 50,000 people came out to greet us when we came in on a Saturday morning. In fact, we were going to come in at 6 a.m. and they called us on the radio and said, don't come in until 10 a.m. We need the TV, the live TV coverage. And so we sat out there for 3 or 4 hours waiting until they told us we could come in. But France is just amazing, the kind of greetings that they give to adventurers on the sea. This was the obligatory flares, and at the finish, and our families were there to see us, and it was just wonderful being home. And this was in Marseille.
2001.
23 boats have tried to break this record and failed.
The reason why the record is tough is it's 3,000 miles of some of the harshest ocean in the world.
This boat is bigger and faster than any other.
This is risky stuff. I mean, we're going to go as fast as we can for the next 5 days. So when you push it that hard, it's a lot of time for somebody to get hurt.
But speed and size don't protect against disaster.
It's like, boom! And right away, look forward, and the bow started peeling away.
If this collapses, you go inside the boat, okay? You guys put harnesses on, you fall in the water, we can't come get you.
Tonight, rough seas, the quest to break the transatlantic crossing record.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
So after we raced around the world, we brought the boat back to the US and did a refit and decided we were going to try to break the transatlantic record. We sat in New York for about 3 weeks waiting for just the right system to surf across the Atlantic Ocean. Basically, when you see a cold front come past Belfast or wherever you are on the East Coast, it's just going out to sea. And some of them go up toward Iceland and Greenland, but some of them go straight across to England. So we were waiting for a cold front that was going to go straight across to England, and we grabbed a perfect one. And we got the ABC guys to come out with us to do the transatlantic. And we were 14 hours into the record run out of New York in August of 2001, and we hit something. It was 3 minutes before sunrise. We were going at 40 knots, one reef, the one hull up in the air. Everybody was very alert. There were 5 people in the cockpit watching. So it wasn't like we didn't see something. There was something at water level hidden. We think it was a container. We were going so fast that it hit the bow and broke the bow. The bow is 60 feet cantilevered from the main beam, and it broke at 30 feet back, halfway back. You can see the break in the bow right here. And it was very foggy. We had to get some halyards out to hold the bow up and sort of fix it because it was bouncing around. And there were many watertight bulkheads in front of where the 3 of us are holding the halyard. And so the water wasn't going inside the hull, but we still had to keep the mast up because the mast was attached to that front beam that the 2 guys over on the right are standing on. So we had to support that. So we pulled it up and we came back to Maine, waited till the weather system went by, the cold front went by, and we motored back to Maine after we went into a harbor and put on the propellers again because we had taken them off for the record run. And here it is in Fox Island Thoroughfare, just near Vinyl Haven, near Cam's house. And so you can see the break. That's what we think was maybe the edge of a container that was floating, sort of mostly submerged, maybe sticking up a few inches. But there were 10-foot seas, so there was no way to see something, whatever it was that we hit. And so that was 2001. The boat is still broken 20 some years later. Unfortunately, we've tried to find a new life for the boat, but that's been difficult. So disappointment, but it was incredible while it lasted, the ride. So I'd give anything to go be able to sail on that boat again. And there she is, right in front of the Boston Yacht Club near my house here. So the next adventure I want to talk about is setting the world's records. We set actually 1, 2, 3, 4 world's records across the Pacific. One initially from LA to Hawaii in 2005 in the fall, in 4 days, 4 and 3/4 days. And it took 10, 11 years for that record to be broken by a slightly faster boat. I think they did it in 4.5 days. And then we set the world's record from San Francisco to Japan in the spring of 2006. I was sailing with, the boat's name is Geronimo. She was built in the same yard, 110 feet, but it's a trimaran instead of a catamaran. So it was really interesting to be able to sail some of the fastest boats in the world, both in a catamaran and in a trimaran, and be able to compare the differences. The crew was all French except for me. They had asked me to become their navigator. We had taken Olivier de Kersauzon, the owner and skipper of the boat, out for rides when we were doing our sea trials in Cherbourg. So we became friends there, and he asked us to come out. So this was the first record to Hawaii, and we get in, and there are helicopters in the air. The French public gets alive on TV in France. Jacques Chirac, the prime minister, president of France at the time, called on the sat phone to congratulate Olivier. So it was a big deal, again, back in France. Nobody ever heard of it here in the US. And this was the team. It was a great group. Olivier was giving a little talk at the end for the cameras. And then we came back, and in the spring, we set off from San Francisco under the Golden Gate Bridge was the starting line. And our goal was to sail to Tokyo. And we went off in a weather system that wasn't quite perfect, but we decided we wanted to go anyway, and we thought we'd be fast enough, which we were. We took off from San Francisco, and we had to go south rather than straight across. And we ended up deciding we were only about 150 miles north of Hawaii. So I told Olivier, well, why don't we just set multiple records in one shot? So let's just go through the finish line at Honolulu at Diamond Head. And I called up the timer, independent timer guy, and he took our time as we jibed through Diamond Head at 3 a.m. and then went on to continue to Tokyo. So here's the route from San Francisco, past Hawaii, past Honolulu, and then on to Japan. It was really interesting sailing the Northern Pacific as compared to the South Pacific in the Southern Ocean. The weather systems and so much different from the Atlantic because the Pacific is so wide, 4,500 miles wide. There's room for 2 weather systems on the ocean at one time. And so you get these waves that are coming from every direction from different storm systems all at once. We're having lunch one day, and all of a sudden a huge set of waves just start coming through and bouncing the boat around. And 3 hours later, they were gone again. Just inexplicable unless you actually could see what was going on with the weather, which we could. Olivier had been around the world 9 times, 2 of them the wrong way, 4 of them, I think, solo. So he was so in tune with the ocean and the weather, and it was great to learn from him. We had some batten problems one day. We had to fix the battens. We had to take the sail down. Once in a while, we would have good weather, quite a bit actually. And the team was really good. They were mostly all Frenchmen from the western part of France, Brittany, which is known for fishermen and sailors, world famous sailors. And this was coming in toward Japan after 2 weeks. And I don't know if some of you may be familiar with the Kuroshio current, which is the analog of the Gulf Stream, and it comes right up past Japan, just like the Gulf Stream comes along the east coast of the United States. And it's a very warm, very fast-moving current, about four knots in places. And we had to get information about it. Tokyo is right here, if you can see my cursor, and we had to get through it and not be in the adverse current and watch for square waves and things like that. So we were very focused on making sure we went through the current properly. And as we came into Tokyo, what I hadn't realized was that you have half the population of the United States and only about 3 major ports that service all of those people. And so the amount of ship traffic going in and out of Tokyo Bay was intense. Every 2 minutes, every 3 minutes, there was a tanker going by or a freighter cargo ship coming in, coming out. The Coast Guard, luckily we had one Japanese guy on board, and he was able to talk to the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard stopped the shipping so that we could actually tack up the bay because the wind was coming right down the bay. We had to tack upwind, and the police escorted us until we got up to Yokohama, where the finish was. But we had a couple of close calls with some big freighters. And there's the team, part of the team at least, at the dock in Tokyo. They turned around a couple weeks later. I had to fly home. They turned around and set the world's record back to San Francisco, and I was doing the weather routing for them on the sat phone. So they did a good job coming back. So the next voyage I want to talk about is Spirit of Bermuda, and the Spirit of Bermuda was built in 2006 in Rockport, Maine, at Rockport Marine. Beautiful job. The insides are all veneered with Bermuda cedar. If some of you might know the Bermuda cedar, which is world famous. It never rots, and it's just a beautiful, nice smelling wood. And the rest of the boat is built out of more normal kind of teak and oak and mahogany. Taylor Allen was able to forge all the fittings, the major fittings that hold the boat together. She's 90 feet long. Our friends Alan Berland and Malcolm Kirkland and Jay Camp and a number of old friends from Bermuda were instrumental in building this boat. And I helped quite a bit with consulting on the navigation and the electronics and the sails and the masts and things like that. The masts are actually carbon fiber, but they don't look like it. This was a replica. The design for the boat came from a painting of an 1835 Bermuda sloop. And this was, you may have heard of the Bermuda Rig, and the Bermuda Rig is the fore and aft sails as compared to the square sails or the square riggers that could go downwind really well. This boat could go upwind pretty well, very well compared to the square riggers. And so they could get out of harm's way. And in the 1800s, when slavery became illegal in many of the countries of the world, in England, the Bermudians got a license from the Queen to be privateers and go and find the slave ships and free the slaves and bring them back to Bermuda, and also share the bounty of whatever they got in terms of riches from capturing the boats. So there were a lot of Spanish galleons and other things that they were able to seize. So they would go out from Bermuda with 120 men, mostly freed slaves and others, and they would catch a slave ship and then put 30 of their men on board and sail back to Bermuda. And so this was the history of the island. And so this is an amazing program, and it was really meant to help the community come together. Bermuda is 70% Black and 30% white, a lot of British citizens, obviously. And they really wanted to bring the community together, and this was the program to do it. So this was the maiden voyage. I was honored to be the only American on board. And we had people from all walks of life in Bermuda. Made great friends on this voyage. The guy steering there ran a truancy program for the schools. The guy in the back was one of the top tugboat operators in Bermuda. And some of the kids who were watch leaders on the boat went on with maritime careers. This is the first time that we got Bermudian to maritime careers. So it was about 7 days. We set off from Rockport and sailed down to Bermuda through the Gulf Stream. I knew that there was going to be a bit of a storm at first, and I talked to the captain, said, well, do you want to go? The boat can handle it. And he said, yeah, it's probably a good thing to get everybody used to it. So we just went out, and it was a bit rough the first couple of days, but the boat was well tested and ready to handle it. Here's some video of sailing it. So it took us about 5 days to get to Bermuda. As we were doing it, we were on the sat phone and Bermuda radio, giving interviews. The whole island was waiting for us. This was a big deal there. And these guys, for most of them, it was their first time offshore, and it was a great experience. We got to see some whales as we got off the continental shelf. Here we are coming to the Gulf Stream. This is my navigation station that we built. And I set it up so that we could have lots of people in this nav station so that they could all participate and help me navigate. This was as we're crossing the Gulf Stream. You can see the hot water here and the eddies and the main current here with a big meander that we wanted to hit. And Bermuda is down in the bottom right-hand corner. So the sun came out eventually and people felt a little bit better. And as we got into the Gulf Stream, it got a whole lot warmer. It was September, so it was a little chilly at night. We put the fishing lines out, caught a nice fish. We had some great cooks on board who knew just what to do with it. And here I am giving a weather lesson to everybody about what to expect and what the weather forecast was looking like and how storm systems moved and so forth. And then somebody else, this was Jay, giving a lecture about sail tactics and sail trimming and things like that. This is Marcus, one of the kids who'd been in a bit of trouble in Bermuda and had come on this voyage, and the program, he'd come up and help finish the boat, and the program was really helping him get his life squared away. And he borrowed the camera of the journalist from the Bermuda Gazette, Royal Bermuda Gazette, who was on board. He borrowed the camera and started taking pictures and writing some articles, which we sent off to get published in the newspaper, which was very proud for him. And this is Raquel. He went on to, I think he went to the Olympics in lasers. Very good sailor. And so I was first time, as I say, offshore for a lot of these guys. But everybody learned a lot, worked together really well. As we came into Bermuda, the entire, every boat in Bermuda came out to see us in. We did a big tour of the harbor. The fireboat came out and gave us a celebration, led the parade, and you can see all the people at the quay when we were coming in. We had the kids program out, and now 15, 16 years later, I think 10,000 kids have gone through this program. Every 13-year-old in Bermuda spends a week on this boat during the winter program. They take each middle school class out for a week and anchor at different spots around the island and help the kids get to know the island and the water and learn about teamwork and how to run a boat. And then a lot of kids graduate from that and get interested and come back and want to be watch captains and get into other programs that there are in Bermuda for on the Spirit of Bermuda. In fact, we're going to be racing her again this year in the Bermuda race. This will be the 4th time we've raced her in the Bermuda race. The governor and everybody gave speeches, and it was a great fanfare. So, but we're very proud of what's happened with this program, and you can see that sailing has become a really important part of the community in Bermuda. So now I'm going to switch gears and go someplace cold again. We're going to go down to the Falkland Islands in South Georgia. Many of you probably know the story of Ernest Shackleton and the trip that he took, trying to become the first person to cross Antarctica. And he was going to go to the Weddell Sea and then trudge across. Well, he didn't quite make it. I'll give you the short version of the story. He left South Georgia Island and sailed down into the Weddell Sea. Just below the picture here is the main part of Antarctica. This is the peninsula that sticks up, that divides the Weddell Sea on the east from the Pacific Ocean on the west. And so he got frozen in the Weddell Sea, and the boat broke up, got crushed by the ice. The currents in the Weddell Sea took him on a big roundabout journey and brought him right up to near Elephant Island. And then it was spring and summer, and the ice floes that they were on broke up, and they had to get in their lifeboats and row and sail to Elephant Island, which was right here. Now, nobody knew. I mean, obviously they didn't have sat phones. This was 1918 or 1914, I think. And nobody had sat phones, of course. So nobody knew what was going on. And so he figured everybody would just think that they died someplace. And so he had 25 men on Elephant Island, and he had to figure out a way to get back to civilization, to get a boat and get everybody off. So they took one of the lifeboats from Elephant Island, 800 miles, and the wind, as you can imagine, blows through the Drake Passage. It's 5,000 miles of Pacific Ocean width here, and it all has to jam through this Drake Passage, and it focuses straight on South Georgia. And so when he went out of Elephant Island, He sailed for a couple of weeks and with 6 people in this lifeboat that was covered with sealskin, and they made it to South Georgia Island. They were afraid to go around the bottom and try to go on the east side, is where there were 6 whaling stations, and that's where he left from. But there was nothing on the west coast, and nobody knew the west coast. And so, but they knew that they had to go there, because if they went around the bottom and tried to get around to the east coast, they might just get blown to South Africa and die, because they might just miss it, because they couldn't go upwind with that lifeboat. So they rowed or sailed right into the bay here that I'll show you, and that was about 800 miles. So we sailed from the Falklands. We went hiking in Patagonia for a couple of weeks, and then flew to the Falkland Islands, Stanley, and then sailed for 1,000 miles downwind to South Georgia Island. And once he got there, he, as I said, he landed on the west coast, but he had to get to the east coast. And that was the problem, because it was 30 miles to the east coast across glaciers and uncharted territory that nobody had ever been in. And I'll show you a map of that in just a moment. So here we are leaving Stanley in the new, at the time, new Pelagic Australis, which was 74 feet compared with the 54-footer we took to Antarctica. And here we are going downwind. We left the main down and just had wing and wing pulled out jibs for 1,000 miles. Took us about 5 days, and we were there. Easy as anything, even though the seas were big and the wind was strong, but we were going downwind. This is Skip Novak here, the owner of the boat. And here's South Georgia Island as we come upon it. And we're coming right in here, just the same place that Shackleton came. It was called King Haakon Bay, which is a bay that goes in very deep into the island. He thought that would be the best chance to then get across to Stromness, which was the whaling station that he was targeting. So we anchored in King Haakon Bay and wanted to see what this traverse was like. Shackleton had done it in about 36 hours, and my respect for him and the 3 people that made it across there is just immense. They had bad conditions at first, and they had at least moonlight and decent conditions, walked all night and just kept going. So here's the map, and this is the end of King Haakon Bay where we anchored. And then Shackleton didn't know where he was going. Nobody had ever charted the inside of South Georgia Island in 1916, it was. Whoops. And so he came across to Possession Bay. Now, Possession Bay is where Captain Cook had come in 1775 for the first time to see South Georgia Island and claim it for the British. And so he came up to Possession Bay and then realized that that wasn't going anywhere. He turned around, he came down around here, tried to get across a big ridge of mountains here, tried 2 or 3 different places, finally found a place, if you read the book that he wrote about it, they had to rappel down with a rope down this cliff and then get onto the glacier and avoid getting caught in the crevasses, and walking all the way across the Fortuna Glacier, and then around here and around Fortuna Bay, down across the outflow of the Koenig Glacier, which was ice cold water that they had to cross, and then up another ridge of mountains. This is a ridge of mountains here that is quite steep, as you'll see, and then another ridge of mountains here, and then finally to Stromness. And he got there at 7 a.m. in the morning. He'd been gone for, I don't know, I think it was 9 months or a year, and he was pretty straggly. And the only reason that the commissioner of the whaling village recognize him was because of his voice. We didn't recognize him visually. So this is where we went, was the blue, and the green was day 2. So we went up here, and then we had a 60-knot winds, and it was just blowing like crazy. But luckily it was behind us, so it helped us get up the mountain. But we couldn't see anything, and it was dumping just feet of snow. So when we got to this ridge that Shackleton ultimately rappelled down, there was so much danger from ice. We could hear the ice falls, we could hear avalanches all around us, and we decided it wasn't safe to go down onto the glacier. So we retreated back this greenway to a snowfield, and then got the boat to sail 120 miles around to pick us up in Possession Bay. And then we sailed around here to Fortuna Bay, and then walked up the green part and met his path again, and up over the breakneck pass, and down across the Kona Glacier, and then up again and down into Stromness. So that's what we'll see. So here we are leaving on our dinghy. The seals are out to greet us. This is like 6 a.m. in the morning, and we've already cached all of our skis and our skins and our packs and our sleds up on the previous day, so we're ready to go. So here we are. We walk up to get all of our gear that we had cached the night before and start putting it on. The weather was highly variable. Some moments it was just screaming and snowing, and other moments the sun would come out. But here we are. We've got about 50-pound sleds, each of us, and then once we get up on this snowfield, we'll be all roped together in 2 groups of 4. And just in case somebody falls in a crevasse or something like that. So we had skis and skins, alpine touring gear, and then crampons and ice axes for when it got even steeper. So here we are going up the first snowfield, and you can see the wind behind us, and Hawken Bay in the background here. And now we're getting up to the ridge, and this is just getting to be nightfall. It's blowing like hell, and we're trying to get the tents up. We're successful in getting them up, and you can see right here this. I don't know if you can see it well on the Zoom, but there's a little line here. That's a 120-foot hole that's how like the wind will cause drifts around your house. Well, the wind had caused a drift around a giant rock, a little mini peak, and it was 120 feet deep. So if you got out to pee in the night, you had to be careful not to go over to the edge and fall off, because it would have been catastrophic. Wouldn't have gotten out. And that's a little mini peak that was there that had caused that 120-foot hole. So in the morning, it was still snowing like crazy, and we could hear seracs falling off the mountains, and we just thought it was not such a great idea to try and rappel down the face, being in the lee. It would have built up a lot of snow and avalanche conditions. So this was the next day. We actually backed off and went down the snowfield and radioed and said, look, it's going to be 2 or 3 days at least before this gets safe again. So why don't you guys sail around? So we had to wait 2 or 3 days, and the weather finally cleared up, and there's Amy enjoying the sun for a moment. But at night, the winds were so strong, they would be up at these 10,000-foot peaks, and the air would get cold, and it would just fall down these slopes, and you could hear them. It sounded like a freight train coming, and it would just hit the tent and just shudder the tent. And we were all huddled together. There were 3 of us holding down our tent. This guy, Ed, had been climbing in the Himalayas a lot. He said he'd never seen anything like this. And this is all snow you can see on the bottom that we had to get out of the tent because it had all blown in. So, but it was a nice few days waiting for for Pelagic to sail around to be able to get us. And then we talked about getting to a meeting spot down in Possession Bay, but we couldn't really see where we were going. So, there it's kind of nice, but it drops off to some cliffs and you couldn't really tell which way to go. So we had to get some direction from the guys on the boat to kind of coordinate where we were going to come down and meet them. And we found this one big ramp with tons of seracs that had fallen down. And you're just kind of tiptoeing very quietly, just trying to get through this snowfield before, as it was warming up, because you can see all the giant pieces of snow or ice actually that had fallen from the cliffs way above and come down here. So it was, a little nerve-wracking trying to get down through there. But we were able to make it, and this is where the guys met us, was down here. That's Magnus walking up to see us. There's Amy and me coming down, and we finally make it down and get in the boat and come back to Pelagic and spend the night. We pull up the anchor. You can see all the kelp that had built up for a few days on the anchor chain. It was quite a job getting all that kelp off the anchor. And we sailed around to 2 bays to Fortuna Bay to start our next part of the traverse. So here it's 6 in the morning, beautiful sunrise in Fortuna Bay. And there's Amy getting ready to go out for, it's going to be a 14-hour day probably, up over 2 mountain ridges and through the tongue of the glacier. So here we are getting in the dinghy, and we're going to put on our skis and start climbing up. There's the bay behind us. The boat's right down here someplace. And it took us all morning long to climb up this glacier, the Fortuna Glacier. We're giant crevasses everywhere. It was very cool to see. And now we get up to Breakneck Ridge, and Skip gets up there. This is his 3rd time here, but he's still not quite sure where we're going. So we're standing here looking at the GPS and trying to figure out where we are, where we're going. And I think we settled on this one or this one. I think it was this one over here. Was the pass. So here we are starting to climb up. We had to take our skis off. You can see crampons on the that we put on our boots now to get up on the very hard snow pack. And then it starts getting steeper and steeper. We got our skis either on our backpack or carrying them, and crampons, and pretty soon we'll get the ice axes out. There's Amy with her crampons crossing the rocks to get right to the top of the pass. And she was roped up just like I am. And this is Julian belaying me at the top. So we got up over the ridge and skied down a very steep part at first, and then got onto these big snowfields, which were a lot of fun, although it was a bit breakable crust and warming up. But you could see Stromness in the background. And this is where Shackleton, had come right over this same ridge and had to walk down and figure out where was Stromness. And I think he recognized it by something that he saw on the cliff across the bay from Stromness, which is nestled down. You can't quite see it, it's down below these rocks. And so as we went down, there were times where we'd go down and that particular path didn't work, and we'd have to climb back up and go back down another place because you know, there just wasn't any way to go. It would end in a cliff. So even though we knew where we were going, generally it was pretty difficult to get there. And we had to cross the Koenig Glacier. It was icy cold, as you can imagine, and some people took their boots off. Some people had their tall boots on. I think that's what Amy had there. And then we crossed up and started walking up to the next ridge of mountains. So this is the area that we had gone up and over, and now we're going up the second ridge. And I'm putting my skins on here, and we get to the top. You can see Skip has some reindeer antlers that he found. There's some not native reindeer that were there. The whalers had introduced herds of reindeer at one point. So Skip collected some of those. And then we started down, started to get nice over on that side. We had some good skiing until we got down to the bottom where it was warmer and we had to take our skis off and walk. And Stromness is right at the end, right where the water is here. So we came up to Stromness. This is the next whaling station over, called Grytviken. And you can see the old whaling drums where they stored the whaling oil, and all the piping, and you know, it was basically a factory where they would kill whales and get all the whale oil to send back to fuel homes and lights and civilized world. So this was the church that was built in the 1800s. I think the Norwegians for their men who were whaling here. And this is where Ernest Shackleton was buried. He died nearby and was buried here in Grytviken. We had a nice celebratory dinner. This was in the main salon of the boat, so it was roomy and we could get everybody around the table. Then, oh yeah, so the next slide is going to be a little bit gory, but I wanted to show you because when we got to Grytviken, there's a British Antarctic station, science station, with about 6 or 10 people there, and we were getting a tour of what they were doing, and somebody yelled, "Hey, there's a bullfight!" And so everybody ran out. The whole place cleared out, and everybody ran out to watch the bullfight. And these are 2 elephant seals. Each of them weigh more than a Volkswagen, and they're fighting for primacy of the harem. It was about a minute long. There's all the females and the babies right here on the beach. And so we went out to the boat and we went around after Grytviken. We went to St. Andrews Bay, where there's a colony of penguins called king penguins. And these are the babies, the ones in the brown fluff, and then these are the king penguins. They're smaller than emperor penguins, but smarter and prettier than most of the other penguins that we've seen in Antarctica and those regions. They were really cool to watch. Here, I'll show you another movie of being really close to the baby penguins. sitting down and they were just coming right up to my camera, and this little guy just walked right by. And then when I stood up, they all were surprised I was so tall and they jumped back. But you can see I think there were about 300,000 or so penguins in this colony. And the parents would, all the young penguins would gather together, and the parents would go out and fish and bring it back and feed the youngins. It was sort of a community thing where sometimes both parents would leave, and some other parent would take care of the creche of young penguins. We were lucky enough to go to one of the 7 nesting sites of the giant albatross, Prion Island, which is on South Georgia, right next to South Georgia. And these birds are sometimes, I think, 15-foot wingspans, 12-foot wingspans, the largest birds in the world. And they live about 60 years, and it takes about 9 months for them to reach enough maturity to be able to fly. This bird is not ready to fly yet, but is just practicing. And these birds are flying, and they'll fly for 10,000 miles. And in the Southern Ocean, you see them all the time below 40 South, and they're just amazing birds to watch. They barely ever flap their wings. They barely ever land on the water, but they're just gliding all the time and flying the lifts that come off the waves. So that was quite a treat to be able to see where they were nesting. And then we sailed upwind for 1,000 miles to get back home to Stanley, to Falkland Islands. That was a very slow trip. It took more than a week, and sometimes we were down to about 1.5 knots of velocity toward our goal, but we made it eventually. That's the path we had to take to get back upwind, and part of it was sort of close reach, and then we had to tack all the way up to Stanley, and that's where we ended up. And that's our team. There's myself, and I can't quite see, it looks like Skip and Julian and Amy, Giorgio and Ed and Gretchen and Cam Lewis. That was the team. So the last little video clip, and then I'm done. The last one is one of my favorite memories from sailing around the world. It was the day that, or the 3 days that we had the 75 knots of wind. We were down to a small jib, or no jib actually, and 3 reefs in the main. And we were still doing 35, 40 knots down the face of these 50 and 60 foot waves. And you'll see it coming up here. I'm standing on the back of the boat, harnessed in, tied in with 2 straps so that I can be steady enough to film. The camera's driving. These are just sort of normal 40-foot waves here. But the boat, you can see, tracks really well. Turn around and look. It's very hard to see how big these waves are. If you want to make the waves go down, all you have to do is point a camera at them. They don't look so big, but it was amazing to watch them and think, how could the boat actually get up the face of that wave before it? Here's a 60-foot wave you can just see going by here. And this is Randy Smythe, 2-time silver medalist in the Olympics, holding on to dear life on the rail. The reef is rolling at me the whole line. And it's flying down the wave at 25 knots. Now they're congratulating themselves for having survived. And that went on for 3 days and 3 nights. And that's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Larry. That was a lot of adventures. We didn't get any questions in the chat. Somebody did make a comment that the Bermuda, the Spirit of Bermuda had been at in Belfast, which is kind of cool. I don't know when, but that was the only comment that came in the chat. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. You can unmute yourself.
I find it hard to find. I couldn't find where to post the questions.
Oh, well, if you have a question, Mickey, go ahead and ask it.
Well, I mean, I have a gazillion.
Well, we have 10 minutes, so.
Right. Well, so Larry, after all of this, what is your next? What happens next?
Oh, I don't know.
Have
We keep thinking of new things to do. I've been foiling a lot lately, electric foiling and wing foiling and kite foiling. So that's been my source of adventure and fun. But I'm sure we'll find some other cool things to do.
And so what of team adventure and the connection with the classroom? Are you doing any more of that?
No, it's you know, after we broke the boat, it sort of we tried to find ways to use it as a program or get other people to use it as a program, but it really never took hold. So it's been kind of dormant, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. Including the kids back home into your program. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were in Cape Town, why did you have to wait that time before you could start again?
Well, that was the rule. Because it was supposed to be a non-stop race around the world. If you stopped, the rule was you had to stop for at least 48 hours. So we couldn't just drop them off. We had to go and just wait. But we found plenty to do in that time.
See, there are other questions coming through.
Yeah, so we do have a question. Lee asked, do you have a favorite boat?
Oh, I think different boats for different things. So I have lots of favorite boats. I don't have any one in particular, but all of these boats are favorites. The gunboat that we've been sailing, the 60-foot gunboat is a fantastic boat. And anything with foils is fantastic for me.
Can you explain what a foil is? Because not everybody.
Oh, yeah, it goes on a surfboard or a kite board, and it sticks down into the water, and it's an airplane wing. And so when you go about 7, 8, 9, 10 knots, all of a sudden it lifts you out of the water. So you're flying above the water by about 3 feet, and you don't have to worry about the waves anymore.
Cool.
Whole new sport.
Yeah, my brother has one on the back of his boat. So instead of water skiing, they do the.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It looks hard to me, but anyway.
It takes a little while.
Yeah.
But it's doable.
So lots of people are just thanking you for your presentation. I don't have any other questions just now. Mickey, do you have more?
No, I mean, I have been in awe of you forever, and I just can't thank you enough for coming and spending the time to share this with Come Boating, which is very special to me. And yeah, thank you, Larry. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, everybody who came and viewed this evening. So, and
Yeah,
Brenda, as always.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah, it's always fun to have more winter adventures virtually this year, all years, but it's just fun.
And of all of these this was the most amazing adventure.
Yeah, I got to go along with that. I mean, I've presented
Art.
and
there's Art.
I was blown away by this thing. I mean, I got about 1,000 questions, but I mean, one question is, was that Gretchen Scott?
It is, yeah.
Amazing. I mean,
yeah,
we worked together on a yacht for a while, and I just,
great.
I'm amazed at the physicality that, I mean, I knew Gretchen a little bit, and I've sailed with Cam, you know, quite a bit against him and with him. You guys are in amazing physical shape, and I'm getting really decrepit at age 77. And I just wondered, did you all do a year of training physically to get into the condition to go up and down the Shackleton route, or can a normal person get that strong? It's inspiring.
I mean, you know, it was 8 or 9 years ago now. I'm almost 70, so you know, 7 or 8 years makes a big difference at this age, as you know. But you know, Amy and I both trained, and Gretchen and Cam trained, and we, you know, as Mickey said, we walked around town with rocks in our backpacks and our ski boots, and just got used to it. So
I think it's an inspiration for people as they're older to realize, I mean, I'm in cardiac rehab right now, and I'm trying to get myself into condition to ski down a bunny hill, but that you can, at any age, if you exercise enough, that you can bring yourself back to that condition. I am totally in awe. This is the best presentation I've seen in years about sailing or adventure, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
All right, thank you. One more question and then we'll end it. Susan asked, do you have any, well, first she said she's inspired to get sailing again this summer, and do you have any favorite sailing adventures from Maine?
Oh my, there's so much of the Maine coast I haven't been to, but I love being in Penobscot Bay. Amy and I and the kids have sailed around in Cam's Dragonfly, and you know, into the basin and Vinyl Haven and Merchant Row and all of those places, the Eggemogan Reach. I just love Penobscot Bay, but I'm eager to find other adventures in Maine.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, everybody.
Larry, thank you so much. And we have a free mooring for you right out here, okay?
All right, well, get it there and use it. Yeah, great to see you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Brenda, for your help.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad it all worked out. I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.